So over the last week, maybe about a week and a half as of recording this video, Persona 5 Strikers has actually kind of taken my life over. Like for real, if you're a fan of the Persona series and you can get your hands on this game, I highly recommend it, because as a sequel to the original Persona 5, it really is everything I wanted, and I can't remember the last time I could say that about a game. But one thing that's really got me hooked on it right now is one of the battle tracks from Persona 5 Strikers called Axe to Grind. Now, I'm not gonna say it's the best battle theme since Last Surprise, but it's the best battle theme since Last Surprise. And surprisingly, the two have a lot in common, which is one of the reasons I wanted to explore it a little bit. So on this episode of Behind the Music, we're gonna dive in to see what makes Axe to Grind so amazing. And also, if you're worried, since the game is new, I'll keep the footage as spoiler free as possible, so you don't have to worry about spoilers here. Alright, so if this doesn't tell you everything you need to know about this track and why you should love it, I don't know what will, man. So first things first, first thing you hear is this chorus of strings playing together in unison, then underneath you have this sort of jazz organ supporting them and giving them a foundation, while the bass and the drums set up this kind of big band feel. And that's honestly one of the things I like about this song, because it's also something that happens in Last Surprise. The difference is with Last Surprise, there aren't as many layers as Axe to Grind, but you still have this feeling of a grand entrance. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Atsushi Kitajo, the game's composer, took a page out of Last Surprise's book. But one of the reasons I kind of prefer this intro is because of how quickly it moves. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean the tempo, I mean more of like how the mood or how the atmosphere is kind of fast paced compared to Last Surprise. And one of the reasons it feels that way is because of a common technique composers like to play around with and utilize called syncopation. And if you don't know what syncopation is, it's basically when the music is temporarily displaced off of the beat to give it a more interesting sound. You usually hear this in a lot of jazz because it gives it a funkier feel and changes it from something that's relatively tame to something you can kind of dance to. The syncopation here really gives the music a funky feel and really lets the music flow. And when the drums sort of hit to really accent the syncopation and make it stand out more, that also helps it move it along. And honestly, the way this piece starts with all of that working together, it really fits the mood of the combat as well. Because I will say, Last Surprise is perfect for a turn-based RPG because that song really gives off an elegant yet calculated feel, like the Phantom Thieves were always 10 steps ahead of you. But this piece doesn't really let you rest and really only stops to let you sit on these really nice chords for a second before moving on. Axe to Grind isn't as refined as Last Surprise, but I think it works well in the context of an RPG with real-time combat. Because contrary to the turn-based Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, Persona 5 Strikers, you're constantly going around and fighting with maybe a moment's rest when you're taking time to heal and jump right back into the action. Now, if you watched the last episode of Behind the Music, you know that one thing I really like to pay attention to is orchestration and how sort of each layer interacts with each other and how it affects the piece as a whole. Well, what I like here is how the layers sort of change consistently throughout the piece. It starts loud here, but when you get to the verses it quiets down only to come back when the chorus hits. I kind of like when music has that sort of ebb and flow and kind of go wherever it wants. One thing I really enjoy here is the jazz organ because it kind of reminds me of what you would hear in a gospel setting. But then after this very grand and exciting intro, the music sort of calms down when you get to the vocals. And I just gotta say now, Lynn freaking killed it on this track. She really sells the classiness and grace of the Phantom Thieves really well when she comes in with the vocals. Now, you can hear it here, but the music sort of calms down for a while, but still has that same drive as it did earlier, which is interesting because the orchestration isn't nearly as heavy, so how does it keep the flow going? While Lynn distracts you with the vocals and makes you think she's setting the mood and the tone for the piece, it's actually the drums, the organ, and the bass that kind of drive this music. And earlier we were talking about the organ, and I really think it's interesting to see how quickly the organ can change and how versatile it is in the context of this piece, which we'll talk about a bit more later. One thing I haven't even mentioned though, and one of my favorite parts about this piece is actually the bass. This whole time it's just maintaining this constant groove, which honestly can be said for a lot of tracks in Persona 5. I know the running joke is that the bass player is never heard and it's not that important, but honestly, I disagree. There are a lot of songs, especially in Persona 5, that definitely wouldn't be the same if they hadn't had that support from the low voice. While I was working on this video, I decided to go ahead and arrange the bass line before one of the verses so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. And now the last thing I want to talk about is the chorus, which actually has one of my favorite parts that I actually didn't notice until I started working on this video. So right before the chorus in Last Surprise, there's this quick break before everything picks back up when you get to the chorus. Now, the same thing kind of happens here right before the chorus. It's smaller and really easy to miss out on, but right before the chorus, there's this space that's only filled with the vocals and the drums. It's not as prevalent and definitely gets overshadowed by the rest of the piece, but I think it's cool when music does stuff like this. And one thing that came back from the intro to the chorus were actually the strings. They're still playing in unison with each other, but they do something really interesting beneath the melody. So what happens is, in the first half of the chorus, if you want to call it that, they sort of go back and forth between accompaniment and counter melody. Because if you listen, they're holding out these chords with the piano, but they have this little feature before everything lines back up with the vocals to blend back into the texture. Now, remember when we were talking about the organ a little bit earlier? Because in the intro, we had it playing these sort of really loud, hallelujah gospel chords, but throughout the verse, it's just quietly playing in the background supporting the vocals. But now, when you get into the chorus, you have it going back to the same style it was doing in the intro. And while it's kind of expected, yeah, of course, everything comes back for the chorus, I think it's really cool that it essentially plays into the duality of the Phantom Thieves if you think about it. The mysterious nature of these chords as you go through the verses is kind of representative of what makes the Phantom Thieves so cool. You have these mysterious chords being played as if they're sneaking through the shadows and have this sort of grace about them, but when the chorus hits, you go back to the louder side, which is kind of what you get when you actually face to face with the Phantom Thieves, basically saying, yeah, we may be elegant, but we can still take you down, which honestly could not represent these characters better. So while Axe to Grind kind of took a bit to grow on me, honestly it's become one of my favorite tracks of the game, and it was really fun to sort of break it down a little bit for you guys. So if you want to see more of this series, share it out with your friends and let me know what you'd like to see next. I got a request in the comment on the last video, so next up we're going to be analyzing some more Kingdom Hearts music. So go ahead and leave a comment and it could possibly be the next video. Well, that's gonna be all from me today, so I'll catch y'all next time.
Everyone's the same. If you regret, reset the game.